I really do have to figure out some theme music. Welcome to my live stream, What I Need in a Sub. I'm Miss Pearl of OMissPearl. You can find me on a number of places. You can find me on Twitter at OMissPearl. You can support me on Patreon. That's patreon.com/OMissPearl. And of course, I have my 10 Years This Month blog, OMissPearl.com. We're coming to you live. If you're hearing this recording later, it'll be popped up on YouTube with a quick little live stream in the heat of a rather warm beginning of June. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for your support, and for anyone who's listening, feel free to leave a comment to say how you're doing. Hi there. All right. So this stream might be a little shorter than usual. You can tell by my very bedraggled appearance that I am dealing with the fact that June is having a weensy bit of a heat wave to start off. I put up my pride colors, which as usual, I've gotten confused by which hand I should be using. There we go. Point at the camera. It's right by the camera. There we go. There's my little banner. And I have my companion. Don't worry. They are wearing a safety harness and will remain in a perfectly safe position. They are watching and making sure there's no bad behavior in the comments. If you have any mysterious dreams of horrifying euthanasia panda spirits, well, you know what happened. If this is your first live stream, this is about BDSM. If you happen to be a minor, I'm probably not authorized to talk to you about this. This is a decision that in most countries is still left up to your parents. If you need more information in a legitimate source to get it, where I don't have to worry about protecting you from adults who don't have your best interests at heart, consider going to scarletine.com or checking out your local library, as a surprising quantity of libraries will let you, even if you're a minor, check out anything you want. They think you're responsible enough. Be that as it may, the topic was requested by Charm Quirk, who's one of my long-term Twitter followers, but more importantly, they are a co-mod at r/femdom community, one of the best subreddits for femdom content and discussion, if not the best of all, but if I say that, the other ones might get mad. I think it's the best. But I'd be happy to see how awesome your community is to be proven otherwise. That's always the best to do. I have some water to stay hydrated, but because of the nature of streaming, I had to turn off all the fans. And as usual, if you see my eyes darting to the side, I am extremely distractible. I'm going to blame that I'm neurodivergent for that, but honestly, I don't think most people have an easy time watching a tiny version of themselves mirror absolutely everything they do just out of their vision. And I know a lot of live streamers will move that out of the way. Also, we've moved the microphone closer to my mouth, which hopefully is not agonizingly loud and will deal with the problem that everything I was making was turning into ASMR, which I like, but is not what everyone was looking for. You can tell I'm super bedraggled because I'm coping with the warm weather by taking regular showers. We do have air conditioning, and it is doing its best, but these buildings were not designed for this kind of heat, and climate change comes to us all. Tap water is the sponsor of this episode. All right, so the question of what one might want in a submissive is one of the most common things to pop up in a femdom or BDSM-oriented group. And it's always the guys who ask that. What do you want in a male sub? What would you like for a slave? What would you like to have in a submissive? And they're always looking for some commonalities. And the answer that they always get is, outside of it helps if you're into BDSM, it tends to be more subjective to what you're into for the guy. So unfortunately, there's only a certain point that you can take with this, that you can extrapolate more broadly. Now, if you're really lucky, and my goodness, seeing myself is super distracting, I'm just going to minimize that. Click. Click. Okay, now I'm no longer staring at a picture of myself, and I can pretend that that is you, which goes a lot better. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, you can't necessarily extrapolate what I'm going to be saying about myself to refer to what every dominant mistress, ma'am, lady goddess, lord with female pronouns, or any number of dominants out there may want. But I got asked, so I'm going to answer. And the first thing you have to take into consideration is my sexuality. And that's not to say that I don't have a libido. On the contrary wise, the description I use is that the specific circumstances in which my sexuality functions are very limiting, but once I know the specific circumstances, well, it works very, very well. I just don't necessarily experience the scope of attraction you might when you normally think of someone as being gay or straight. I already did an episode about that, about my asexuality and how it relates to kink. But be that as it may, the context of me being with someone, if I want to consider them my submissive, is that I need to form a strong emotional attachment to them to make it any sort of prolonged deal. Additionally, a serious component of this will be sharing creative projects together and conversations. I'm not going to be one of those people who goes out there and calls myself sapiosexual, but I will say that the common pattern of my experience with falling in love with men has shown, more often than not, a component of that has definitely been our communication through writing. With Silver, this was facilitated through joining a LARP club, and not only did we have entertaining role-playing in person, which allowed us to express our creativity in different ways, but it also allowed me to enjoy a whole scope of writing back and forth through the lens of our characters, and I thoroughly recommend LARP as one of the places, as well as theater or people who are interested in different fiction, to allow us to explore topics that lean into kink. And I don't mean hardcore pornography, but the themes that we find attractive in contexts that allow you to flag for each other. One of the reasons I think that fandoms, fantasy, sci-fi, you name it, anything with fiction, tends to attract people into BDSM is, first of all, I think kinky people are heckin' nerdy. It's just another nerdy group because they're often really, really into the same thing and collect them like crazy, and maybe their motivation is fetishistic. But is it really any different than the person who owns 300 trains because they like them aesthetically than the person who owns 300 trains because they like them aesthetically and they masturbate to them? Really, it's none of my business what they do with their trains, as long as I'm not the one who has to clean them. Anyway, on the subject of that means that connecting to the person is very important. Theoretically, I think I might be able to have that sort of connection with a person who didn't identify as male. It just hasn't happened. And when it comes to playing with people in a slightly more casual way, I enjoy doing it with people of any gender. For me, looking for a submissive, I find maleness and my expectation for the gender roles tends to flag them in particular directions for certain kink activities that I prefer. If they're female or non-binary, although I don't equate the two as meaning the same thing, I find that if someone's identity is in a strong lean that way, for example, they're non-binary in the sense that I am hard non-binary, not non-binary in the other way that it commonly happens. So they'll say they're a non-binary man, or in my case, I describe myself as a non-binary woman, because it gets across the vagaries of it where my day is not wrecked if people fail to acknowledge the non-binary part of myself, but it's there. And in that particular respect, I found that my attraction extends to the fact that if someone moves into a transitory phase, say they first were presenting as male and then having a chance to think it over, they choose to start presenting as female because that's who they feel they are, then I find that my feelings around them tend to shift as well. And I think it's cool. It means that whatever biology I have in here seems to acknowledge people's internal gender as opposed to the gender I want to impose on them. That's mighty convenient as far as having good manners. I'm not going to pat myself on the back because I know people are capable of masturbating to 2 circles with dots in them, and that is not a pair of tits, but that's how good the human brain is at filling out details that aren't there. But, there is that psychosexual component of communication, and maybe this gives me a bias because strong verbal skills, particularly in a written domain, really are significant for building that connection with them. When it comes to body types, there's bodies I find aesthetically attractive, but when I look at the scope of men that I've been capable of being attracted to, and women I've been capable of being attracted to, and non-binary humans for that matter, I haven't found that there have been that many limiting factors. There's a few components that I find I tend to gravitate to. More often than not, aesthetically, I prefer significantly taller than the average, but significantly shorter than the average. So one thing that I find is uncommon when I'm talking to other people is my particular draw to shortness. And I don't tend to think of this as being juvenile, and I don't think of shorter men as being less masculine. I think it's one of those things that, well, when I was younger and I was exposed to different social roles, I was shown a scope of different human beings that are out there, and one of the human beings that my mother dated happened to be, well, the word he would have used to describe himself is dwarf. The broader term is little person, but I think dwarf is correct here because he had dwarfism, and all I remembered about him was he was a wonderful young male boyfriend of my young single mother, and I had absolutely no problem with that. It wasn't like a live-in surrogate father. He was very good with kids, and then he went on to get married and have a kid of his own. Wonderful father. But the main point being is that I had this background where I never assumed it would be a limiting factor. And I think as far as being a dominant, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to transgress gender roles. But if you're already going to be dominant and you're female, you have a lot more encouragement to do so because of the way that different gender roles tend to be coded as far as power. It's not surprising that when you see something like role reversal as far as a kink topic, it will basically be light forms of femdom and people who enjoy things that we really wouldn't tolerate in heterosexual courtship otherwise in real life, but we romanticize in fiction. The being pushed up against a wall and the person being all shy and the person pursuing aggressively and things like that. With my partners, the ethnicity of my partner has never been significant. I've actually ended up with a disproportionate quantity of Europeans, which I blame spending a lot of time meeting people online. I haven't felt compelled to stay within my ethnicity or any other detail like that. It just doesn't occur to me that it's necessary. I'm not saying that I don't see color. I am beyond such things. Just, it's not a factor that seems to come up other than the way that groups will do a segregation by self-selecting, even when they don't consciously mean to. I'm getting a little off topic. I think I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how to be a better person, and it tends to come out when I'm discussing things, and it's good to talk about that. But let's get back to what I am attracted to. I could tell you physically that I tend to prefer men with longer than average arms, but they don't have to have it. And I've been attracted to men who've been quite fat, so it's certainly not a thing where they have to be skinny. I'm attracted to a lot of characteristics that aren't necessarily in the scope of enjoyable. Like, I don't want to be that person who says I'm not into big, bulky, boomph muscles, but I find of all the various body types that one might find aesthetically pleasant, it is not my thing, but I'm also reasonably confident that since nobody has that sort of body type without spending a significant amount of investment in getting that way, my opinion of their body mod is none of their business or interest, so I'm sure they will be fine. Anyway, the other thing that is an absolute must-have is that this person has to be a sexual masochist in their own right. A significant quantity of my sexuality is orbiting around the sadomasochistic loop. Now, I'm a full sadomasochist. I enjoy receiving pain in certain contexts, and I enjoy giving pain in certain contexts. That's not to say that I go around smacking people, or if I find someone in pain, I'm automatically going to eroticize them. But if my partner does not view the experience of receiving pain in a context that they can sexualize, and, for example, put it in a context of another form of masochism that I've occasionally run into where they don't enjoy it, but they enjoy it secondarily for the submission that it gives them. Now, there's a bit of wiggle room. There's some mean things that I'll do where if it doesn't arouse them in the moment, it should arouse them later that it was done to them. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. It's one of the hard stops on my sexuality. And while I can write a story that's a little bit meaner, I do find that that tends to be a self-limiting factor. So you have someone who's a good writer and creative with strong verbal skills, very good at back and forth conversation and building stories together. Creativity a must. I'm not going to say they have to be smart, because there's many ways that humans can be smart, but by and large, they need to have a broader curiosity and knowledge about things. And this is not because I am such a wonderful person that I deserve the cream of the crop. This is because I can be incredibly awkward. My poor roommate puts up with this all the time. That I'll be learning something new and I will come running out filled with all sorts of enthusiasm, excitement. I'll be like, did you know that there's a super colony of ants that have learned to have various species of ants implant within themselves so that they're working together as a collaborative unit with multiple queens? Isn't it amazing? And this is one of my primary ways of connecting with other people. It's sharing something that made me really happy. And I'm a super chatty person when it comes to stuff like that. And if you're not interested in me accidentally derailing sex because my brain flipped to talking about the neurological structure of the brain or the fall of the Weimar Republic, or, I don't know, irrigation practices in Bronze Age China, or something similarly non sequitur to the context of what we're doing to most people, you're going to have a bad time with me. I know that I have certain, shall we say, prices of admission, and it's not because I'm better than anyone else. It's just that you're going to have to put up with a lot. The other thing that I find is a must-have is they have to be tolerant of my neurodivergence, and this includes understanding that I'm going to be bad at some things and take it in stride, and also that I'm going to do things differently. Now, I can usually be pretty flexible and accepting of other people's needs, but there are some things I've learned, particularly in my mid-30s, that if I don't tend to them, I become a non-functional adult. The interesting effect of this is that people who are on the autism spectrum also have a strong bias to dating other people on the autism spectrum. And while some of what I've done has been with people with self-diagnosis and some of it has not, there has been a disproportionate number of people who have been in that general direction, largely because they get me in terms of one of the things they don't talk about as much with autism. They tend to focus on the social part. No, they don't understand you. They don't make eye contact properly. They don't understand this, that, or the other. But hypersensitivity on a day-by-day basis is a much more debilitating part of autism. I won't say that I enjoy necessarily having to navigate a neurotypical environment where I don't intrinsically pick up on the social rules as quickly as a neurotypical person might. But it would be considerably easier to cope with those if I wasn't also dealing with things like, can you turn down the sun? It is too loud. Or the fact that my ring light at a normal setting has essentially blinded me, so I am doing this very consciously willing myself not to squint, with an afterburn circle completely blotting out most things in my retinas. I'm very light and noise sensitive, I get overstimulated easily, and combined with my extroversion, this has meant that doing things like this live stream tend to be the norm. And it's helpful to have a partner who tolerates that, a partner who wants to spend a lot of time around all sorts of different people, having guests over all over the house. Again, that is going to be a disaster, which you would think would be like, what does that have to do with finding a submissive? But ultimately speaking, the person who's going to be a good submissive for you is going to be somebody who fits into your life and your other values. And there's other things like, I need someone who has a healthy attitude towards money. I prefer people who are more on the saving side as opposed to the spending side. I'd be very uncomfortable because I've dealt with a lot of financial insecurity and I don't like having to deal with that, and I don't like the unreliability of things, particularly since, for example, I don't know when I'm going to get plowed by an illness again, and all the financial care and stability that I've built up is going to be knocked out from under me. Anyone who's going to be part of my life in the sense of such an intimate relationship better be comfortable with the fact that I write a sex blog, and my idea of a good Wednesday afternoon is sitting down and live streaming things to strangers. So again, you have to be comfortable with a certain degree of openness. With Silver, it's something where even as soon as we started courting, I gave him the URL to my blog, and there's mixed things about doms doing this when they have, well, anyone doing this, when they have a blog that is about their real life and what they get up to. a lot of people are a bit leery of it because when you're still in the dating stage of getting to know somebody, it can be a little risky because what if you say about them gives the wrong idea. I generally work from the principle that I curate what I put up. It is true, but not the whole truth. And with my blog, I will give people a pseudonym. For example, that's why Silver gets called Silver. It's because I needed a quick come up with a pseudonym. There we go. I can put that down and that will cover who it is. And I also generally try to pick a flattering pseudonym that's ambiguous enough that it's more like a password, something that you would need to have the context of the inside of my brain to match it to the person. I also explicitly give people permission, if I've written about them, to come back to me later and be like, I'm not comfortable with this. Can you remove this piece of text? Or I don't like this. And for most of my relationship with Silver, I've cleared what I've written with him. These days, I don't bother sending him my post in advance because he knows the extent of what I write about. He knows what's there. But if there was anything he was never not comfortable with, I would remove. Nonetheless, it is a part of who I am, and I would not be happy with someone whose response was, you have to completely have this be a void in your out there creative life. And I've been with people where that was a problem. Like, I occasionally would do bespoke erotic fiction. That is, someone would give me some topics because they really want the story to exist, so I'd write them exactly what they wanted to have out there, because that's fun. And one of the people that I've been with in the past was super concerned, like, you'll meet a lot of weirdos out there. Now, it was early enough in the relationship that I brushed it off with a playful, like, gif of, well, that ship has sailed a long time ago, because at that point I'd been doing that sort of thing for over 5 years. But it was probably one of those early signs it wasn't going to work out. I don't try to go into bashing people in my blog too much. I can criticize someone for their opinions on kink or why I think that might be a bad idea, but I go out of my way to try to not make exes look terrible, and I go out of my way to try to not put the this person is terrible and they hurt my feelings out there, even when they did, because I don't think that it's necessarily a good idea in an unmatched situation where I'm essentially inviting my audience to have their opinion about this when they're definitely biased towards me. And I think that this is very important to keep that in mind. But as I said, any sub that I have better be cool with the sex blog. They better be creative. They're going to need to be extremely nerdy. I LARP. I like tabletop role-playing. When I met Silver, he had joined the organization when we were meeting together at LARP because he was new to the area by a few years, and he was hoping to meet somebody to have a tabletop role-playing game with, so 3 or 4 different people who were able to make that meeting schedule thing. He did not expect to end up with a mistress. I did not expect that to happen either. I'm very happy about it. It was one of those falling in love things that people who know me say that I had a crush on him beforehand. I don't think I precisely had a crush on him in the way that I describe a crush. I think I was fonder of him than more humans, and I thought he was fun to flirt with. But until we had the kink boxes ticked, I couldn't possibly actually commit to anything long term. It was more fun, but very disposable, and that was pretty much his attitude towards me. I only started falling in love with him after the first time we'd played together. And some of that was extremely lucky that, well, he had a lot to recommend himself. Silver is an extremely private person, whereas I tend to be a very open person. Another person I dated described me as being the sort of person who'd be like, here is my box of spiders, and this one is Bertrand, and this one is Gertrude, and this one is Philippe. And I try to get the flaws and problems that are out there up front. I also go out of my way to try to label them. So it's one of those situations where I need to be able to know the person is kinky, but also I need to be able to know more of the whole person. And then usually my experience with falling in love is that it just spontaneously hits me like a truck before we've initiated anything close to a relationship. But with Silver, we eased into it very gently, and I took my time with it. After the first time we hooked up, we had our fantastic New Year's date. And for him, that was like, yep, this looks like it's probably going to work. Like, this is awesome. And it was after a first extremely good hookup back in December. But the New Year's date was even more so because there was way less awkwardness because I was no longer functioning on a hall pass where I try not to speak ill of the dead, but in this case, one of the ways you could tell the relationship was dead on arrival was the person did not read my blog because, despite having told me they were into kink when I got into the relationship with them, turned out to explain to me they are not into that, and they had not read my novel, the first one I had, The Pet Gentleman, because they are not into that, which, again, any submissive I have probably better be interested in what I'm into enough that they read the fiction that I've devoted over 10 years of my life towards contributing, building, sharing, and showing. You're probably not interested in the me if that's the case. But with Silver, he's also very closed off about who he is to the point where I only really got to know more than the superficial, like, wow, this person is interesting, all those little things that make a person over the course of a few months. And I got to see a little bit more of their constants. Their patience, their kindness. The other thing that gets a really bad rap in courtship is when you talk about looking for a nice person, it's to the point where it's a cliche that we say nice guy with N and G as a trademarked. This person is not a good human being. You don't want to get into a relationship with them. They are going to be kind of black. Well, one of the things in particular that I find incredibly admirable about Silver is just how nice he is. He's nice and he's patient and he's very good at letting things go. He is the polar opposite of me in a lot of respects, whereas I have a hot, flaring temper and will hold a grudge like nobody's business, but also pursue that grudge. Silver goes in the opposite direction, that he will make an attempt if it's something like a social group, and he'll do the various permutations, but once he knows it's not going to work, he will decide, all right, that was that, and I'm done with it, and he will not permit himself to obsess over it or stew over it or really allow himself to lose that much sleep. And, well, I do try to lead my life in a way that reduces the amount of drama and chaos these days. It's pretty accurate to describe us, and there's a cartoon floating around there that I did of us, of I will get into the internet slap fights, he will say something amusing as a witticism, and one of the things he told me early in our discovering each other is that I will never fight someone else for you, and he meant I will never boil into a, online fight, and I appreciate that. It's not something I need. It can be nice when you're working with someone and you're on the same page, just like goal-oriented. Yeah, we'll get this cause taken care of. We'll push this through. It'll get ratified. We'll show this person that they're a dumb head in this argument and we'll win all the likes and favors. But I don't need someone to do that. It's not something I need in a submissive. I don't need an attack sub, and I don't want to make you feel like you're judged, but the guy who follows around the dom who's having a slap fight with someone else and his entire participation is, right on, mistress, yeah! It makes me cringe. Attack subs are incredibly depressing. I think it's perfectly reasonable if you have a scenario where you're also participating in the conversation, because I don't think subs should be seen and not heard. That's a specific fetish, not an entire requirement of a lifestyle. And I guess you would say I need someone not to be an attack sub or a retweet guy or a person who mindlessly engages in everything I do where it doesn't matter what I put out, they would throw a little party. They're allowed to be happy for me even if it's not to their tastes. But if I make something and I put a lot of effort into it, I prefer if they engage with it. And I guess that goes down into you need to care about who I am. If you're going to submit, you can't submit to me because I'm a dominant and you'll submit to any dominant. You can't submit to me because I am beautiful and I'm biased here, but one of the commitments I made in my life was I was never going to be one of those people who was like, oh no, I'm not really pretty. I have all these flaws. I have decided, and you are allowed to think differently. This is not a like, of course I'm delusional. I'm going to be a model and do this and that and the other. It's like, it saves so much energy in my life just to accept, yeah, I'm very good looking and just presume under that thing. And when people say, you look very nice, say, thank you. And if I don't want the compliment because I know they're doing it manipulatively, instead going, stop, oh no, I'm not. Yes, thank you, I know. Or, I had 2 very attractive parents. Well, I don't want someone to submit to me purely because my aesthetics are there, and I don't want them to submit to me because of a superficial trait, or even one that's an inherent part of my being, like that I'm smart. If someone is going to submit to me, I need it to be to me and to the entire me, and that is very important. I think it's one of the reasons why I couldn't necessarily do the pro thing, because, and again, I'm leery of making statements about something that I am not, but I've noticed as a pattern with a lot of the successful professionals, they are very good at connecting with someone intensely whilst also managing to keep them at arm's length and managing boundaries. And I don't think I could do that. I'm good at getting into people's heads and being supportive to random people. And there's a lot of me that I occasionally look at my life and I'm like, you know, I actually probably would make an okay pro-dom. But that brings me to the other point. I do need someone to be patient with my spiders, and that's that I can be both simultaneously very easy to love, but I can also be very difficult to love because there's a lot of behaviors that you might do, like giving me gifts or things like that, that I will not necessarily react positively to them. I won't react like full-on negative yelling at you or something, but like you will give me a present and instead of my response being, oh, that's nice, I will do frankly neurotic things. Like when Silver gave me gifts for, like Valentine's Day, not this year, but last, he just left them on the counter where they were very clearly for me, and I purposefully did not pay any attention to them, and I make sure not even to look at them until he presented them to me as, here, I have given you these. And this was entirely my weird head gremlins. And our relationship had included, like, soft limits for me, things like, you are only allowed to give me 1 gift a month. This is actually something that a lot of sub guys don't work well with. Well, there are guys who are like, I shouldn't have to pay for it. That doesn't make me feel very loved or wanted at all. Giving is a very common love language, and a lot of humans want to do it, regardless of where they fall on a DS spectrum. You can tell I'm increasingly getting overheated. Anyway. So you need to be creative, you need to be articulate, you need to be nerdy. I tend to like them with big eyes. I tend to like them on the shorter or taller side. I'm partial to thinner and elfin personally, and Silver is the quintessential elf. He's also not necessary, but highly entertainingly, the guy's got a painting in his attic. You would not believe that he is in his early 40s. You would be able to say that he's like a decade younger. I don't think he particularly cares either way, but I think it's super entertaining. Other than that, I find I tend to work fairly well with people who are surprisingly reserved. Again, some of this is probably, as much as I'm very extroverted and out there and talk a lot and flamboyant and performing, there's a lot of control that I put into my activities and my behaviors. And, well, there's some spontaneity in what I do. Like, all the videos I'm doing are, in fact, live streams. I'm just making this stuff go up as I go along in my head. This is a ramble, because I actually find it surprisingly easy once I get going to talk to a camera like this, which I don't know where I learned to do it, but I do. Something like that actually combines very well, whether that person is a stereotype of the British, like, I said good day, sir, slam door, or whether there's some other cultural variant of that, like they're Minnesota nice, where they're sweet as pie, but it is very hard to get past that sugary facade of, oh, you look lovely today, and that's all the conversation they'll have. Those sorts of people tend to be very good matches for me. Other than that, it's a good thing if they're into my fetishes. One of them is consensual non-consent. When I'm doing something, I tend to be into the concept of basically someone being sexually overwhelmed, so there will be a lot of stim going on. I already mentioned that the sadomasochism is non-negotiable. An ideal sub is also capable of understanding the difference between providing me the level of stimulation and comfort that I prefer when I'm going to be doing anything physical and them doming. Silver has picked up extremely quickly things like, it may be necessary to press somewhere hard enough that I bruise. It doesn't make me feel less dominant. It just takes that much pressure to ding the nerve endings. And in fact, won't so much be a primal experience while we're doing this. It'll just be an intensity that I may be in the process of topping them. And it makes me feel incredibly dominant to see Silver do these behaviors, like while we're making out, and he'll see that the intensity is building. He'll give my hair a sharp yank at the back, not because I want someone to hold my hair back and make me feel very vulnerable and pulled out of position. It makes me feel dominant because I know that's not a natural behavior for him. Nothing at all would make him consider that to be something he'd do spontaneously. He's been doing it because he's been carefully watching the things I want. In a submissive, I also like to be able to explore and open them up a little bit. One of the things I noticed I have a tendency to do is I'll find someone, if they do have experience, who's like the perfect polished, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes mistress, as you say mistress person, and I will muss them up. I will take the automatic protocols they do, like kneeling on the couch next to me, and haul them up onto the couch and cuddle them. I will play into some of them because it's fun. Like, I like the fact that Silver will kiss the top of my boots spontaneously, even though I've never told him to do that, but it's fun. Itchy nose. There we go. But on the other hand, I really take a lot of pleasure in that, and I even have fond memories about the time that I met someone, and that was the Swede, who they're a sub, and this is what they like, and they have a mistress back in Sweden, and I thought that was great. I joked about the relationship being puppy fostering for the time that we were together, and over the course of it, I discovered that they had an attraction to when I gave certain poses of vulnerability, and as much as I was enjoying doming them, they had much more comfort in the space of being a submissive, whereas I had less practical experience as a dominant at that point. So it made me feel incredibly dominant to seduce them with what looked like submission in a context where I still felt like I had all the power. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. And it's one of those things where I can go, because when they went back to Sweden, they changed their status to switch, and it was worthwhile. It's a very net positive experience, and I'm glad I had it, although in the end I think we weren't quite in the right place to be with each other, because while I had many, many positive virtues that they liked, I was not quite, for example, in the state where I was ready to go into the health and wellness and clean living that they were into, including listening to inspirational tapes and trying to be more inspiring, etc., etc. These days I've gotten a little older, and a little bit of positivity in the background isn't a bad thing, but I was in college and they were a professional, and there were some things about them being a professional that were lovely, but some things that weren't quite what I was looking for. They also have to put up with me doing romantic things, including trying to feed them. If they're the sort of person whose reaction to me making them cupcakes is, oh no, that's terrible, that's not going to work out. They have to be okay with me talking about how desirable they are. I don't have the ability to want a sub where I tell them all the time, I don't want to fuck you, you're not attractive, no woman will ever want you. I'd rather go in the other direction. With Silver, the talk will be, oh, you spend so much time in the gym. I know why you do that. You do that because you're such a slut. You want to attract dominant women, don't you? You want them to look at you and think you're beautiful, and they want to use you, don't you? You can see that there's a big difference between you're a sissy bitch with a limp dick that will never make a woman happy, and making you feel submissive makes you so thick and hard. There's a very big difference in approach, and while I have that extreme sadism, and I can be very mean, I don't have that ability to want to reject my partner, and that doesn't make you bad if you want to, or if you want to receive that, But it's one of those things where you realize that you have to fine-tune, because when you say, I am a femdom, there's so many possible ways to do it right that a lot of what you need to do when you're figuring things out with a partner is make sure that you ask. Even the things you would think you would take for granted. Even the things like, what things can you call me? What context can you call me? Are you allowed to anticipate when I want things? I prefer people who are capable of anticipatory service, but they can ease into it, as opposed to people who only do the things I tell them to do. Other people get completely like they're rubbing your eyebrow the wrong way if you do things without them giving you a say-so. And I guess I've gone a little ways about talking about things, and it is boiling warm, so this is a good place to sign off. If you liked this, don't forget to like and subscribe. And there's the bell thing there, which if you hit it, I am more likely to show up in your feed. You like that. Remember, if you subscribe and you've been enjoying these things, my live stream will come back again. And remember, in addition to what I've been telling you to like and subscribe, you can always support me on my Patreon. That's patreon.com, OMissPearl. You can go out and find one of the many books I've written on Amazon. Or, of course, I'm always happy to see happy comments left below the video. Don't leave trolling comments, though. Those will probably get deleted. Anyway, it was lovely talking to you all, and I hope that you have had a wonderful night. Hopefully I'll be able to see you next Wednesday.